Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Hash Talks. Today we are going to be ranking all of the Star Wars TV shows and movies that have come out before August 2023. Now this comes with a few notable exceptions, an animated show that's come out on Disney Plus that we both haven't heard of, a few random 2D animated shows, including the original Star Wars 2D Clone Wars, and Solo, a Star Wars story, the first Star Wars movie to ever lose money, which, is a pretty good achievement, I have to say. So there are some movies that me and Sparsh have both watched, there are some movies that I've watched, there are some that only Sparsh has watched. So the ones that only one of us has watched, the one of us that has watched it will talk about it. The ones that both of us have watched will both talk about it. Now this tier list is in order of when they came out, so we're starting off with Star Wars A New Hope. So we both watched this movie, and I think it's safe to say that it does deserve the position of S. It's the first Star Wars movie, and it's a very good Star Wars movie. Sparsh, would you agree?
Yeah, I'd agree with it. If you don't think that New Hope is, if you think that New Hope isn't even A tier, then you're an idiot. That's all I have to say.
Okay. Next movie.
It did a pretty good. Oh, sorry. It did a pretty good job of introducing Luke. It felt like quite a simplistic story, and it did have nice special effects for a movie that was made in the 70s. Anything else to say, Harry?
Not really, and that brings us on to Empire Strikes Back. Now, one of the main drawbacks of this movie is that it was made a long time ago, and one area which you can see that very clearly is in the lightsaber fight between Darth Vader and Obi-Wan Kenobi, which is very slow.
Didn't that happen in New Hope?
Yeah, in New Hope, that's what I'm saying. Which is very slow and very boring. But fortunately, Empire Strikes Back improves on that, because the duel between Darth Vader and Luke is much better in this movie. And we also get an introduction to Yoda, who is the mentor character in this series. So this movie is widely considered by most to be slightly better than Your New Hope. So I think we'd probably both agree on that.
I don't think it's. Yeah, I think it's slightly better than New Hope. It ends on a really nice cliffhanger in the series. Lando is seen as like quite a morally objective character. His morals are a bit misguided. But overall, I would say it's better than S. And I do like the starting scene on Hoth. I really like that scene.
It sets up the finale perfectly and is a good story in its own right. And that brings us quite neatly onto Return of the Jedi, the third Star Wars movie ever to be released. And this one is a bit strange because it wasn't as well liked as the other two movies, or at least not as many people consider it to be on the same level because of its rather slow pacing and not as grand of a finale as they would have liked. I think...
sorry, Harry. I'd recommend that this goes into A. Would you agree?
Probably, yeah. A or B. Probably. We'll leave it at A for now because there are some shows and movies that, don't deserve this position.
You have to consider that this was made in the 70s or the 80s, so things would have been as developed as then. CGI didn't exist, so they had to do best with what they had to do, and it still had a good reputation. It wasn't awful. There are guaranteed to be a lot of movies on this list that are a lot worse than this. So for New Hope, Return of the Jedi, for a movie that was made a long time ago, it's still quite good. It has a nice satisfactory finale,
which gets completely destroyed by the sequel trilogy, but we'll get onto that soon enough.
Yep.
What were you going to say?
Okay. Nothing else, sorry. So, Phantom Menace, the first movie, or the fourth movie, depending on how you look at it.
This movie is very political.
Very political. It kind of changes the whole magical type thing for it. It kind of, the midichlorians thing, it kind of ruined the whole Star Wars, franchise. It kind of ruined the whole, it kind of changed the genre too much from being, magical and adventure into political and sci-fi in a way.
That's the reason why a lot of people don't like this movie, because it's kind of goes against a lot of the stuff which was introduced and brought up in the original trilogy, like the introduction.
And it's too bulky. And sorry, Harry, but I'd say it's quite bulky as well. There's a lot of political stuff you have to remember, And there's a lot of information in the title card that you have to remember as well.
Personally, I like these movies a lot more than other people do because I kind of find the political elements interesting. But I know that a lot of people didn't, and on rewatches of Revenge of the Sith... Sorry?
Like me, I didn't like the political stuff.
I said I liked it.
Oh, well, I didn't like it.
So, but upon rewatches of Revenge of the Sith and Phantom Menace, it did get a bit bulky and boring in parts. But regardless, the Phantom Menace goes, I think, in a well-deserved C.
C, yeah.
It's not a bad movie. It doesn't. While it does trash on some of the stuff that the original trilogy introduced, it doesn't exactly contradict it or ruin any of the characters that we're used to. Mostly because there are no characters that we're used to apart from Yoda, who appeared for a bit in the original trilogy. Now,
and also, Jar Jar. Also, it just has C tier because of Jar Jar Binks. We don't have to say any more about Jar Jar Binks.
Yeah.
The audience knows about him.
And now onto Attack of the Clones. Now, this movie is very different from the Phantom Menace because Jar Jar Binks almost disappears entirely, and there's a lot less political stuff. But we also have to see the beginning of Anakin and Padme's relationship developing, which is very painful, to say the least, for the viewer.
and let me delve deep into that. The problem with Anakin and Padme's relationship is that it feels very, very awkward. The relationship between them in the first movie is childish. It's like childish. They knew each other for a long time. But the problem here is that the script they were given was horrible.
I don't like sand.
Who cares?
I don't like... Watch. I don't like sand. That line just summarizes the entire movie.
Exactly. Did Padme ask? Did Padme ask if he liked sand or not? And the acting wasn't that good here. For two good actors, the acting in this movie wasn't that good. But I did like the Boba Fett arc. It made Boba Fett a lot better from who he was in the prequel, in the original series. And I did like the Obi-Wan Kenobi fight against Jango Fett and Boba Fett. Yeah, I liked the final fight was alright, but the problem was there was a lot more CGI in this movie than the originals. And that's why I think it's very similar to its predecessor. So would you say C or B, Harry?
C. Now we move on to the third installment of the prequel trilogy, Revenge of the Sith. Now this is widely considered by everyone, prequel fans and non-prequel fans alike, to be the best movie of the prequel trilogy. And I think I would agree it is. The political elements are almost gone, and it's basically building up to this big finale that we all know has been happening right from the beginning. Anakin's turn to the dark side, and the reveal that Chancellor Palpatine is actually Emperor Palpatine, aka Darth Sidious, the Sith Lord who has been manipulating all of the events in the movies so far. This movie is fast-paced, action-packed for the most part, and it's pretty entertaining overall. You get to see Anakin get tempted to the dark side by Sidious, you get to see all of his friends and the people around him unable to do anything, and you eventually see his fall as all the Jedi are murdered and Anakin and Obi-Wan fight out on Mustafar while Yoda tries to take out Darth Sidious.
But again, there are some problems with this movie.
The script in the entire prequel trilogy is one of its weakest elements, given that the reason that the original trilogy was so good, that George Lucas's now ex-wife edited it from a bulky mess into what it is today. Unfortunately, she didn't work on these movies, which is why you have I Don't Like Sand.
And also, one problem that I had with the movie was, like, it kind of contradicts the originals. Like, it kind of contradicts the whole point of having the originals before, like, the prequels. Like, the final fight, you know that Anakin's gonna fall to the dark side, so you kind of see it coming, and you see the Emperor being the main bad guy in the prequels. So it kind of contradicts the whole thing. Like, the way the Emperor was introduced all the time
that was kind of the point of the thing, to make it seem like that was kind of the point. Moving on.
Yeah, but it kind of ruins the whole mysterious part of it. Like, it kind of ruins the whole mysterious arc. Like he was pulling all the strings, etc., etc. And Anakin's fall, you're kind of like it kind of makes the final fight on Mustafar slightly anticlimactic, because if you remember in what was it, Empire Strikes Back, you see Anakin's like damaged head because of the lava, and so you're kind of expecting who wins the final fight. You see Obi-Wan, who hasn't been in A New Hope, who has no scars on him whatsoever apart from mental scars, and then you see Anakin, who has like tons of burns on him, and you kind of know who's going to win the final fight.
So I think the Revenge of the Sith is undoubtedly better than the previous two prequel movies, but doesn't live up to the doesn't live up to the quality of the originals. So I think this deserves a B.
B.
Now we move on to the final set of movies, the last few Star Wars movies that have ever been released, and Rogue One just sitting there, released in 2015, but just we don't talk about that. So the first up on this list of the sequel trilogy, the trilogy that takes place 30 years after the original trilogy, is The Force Awakens, which is just a copy of A New Hope.
But worse.
Yeah, but worse. With better CGI, admittedly, but that doesn't make it better. This movie has all of the elements of A New Hope. A child with no parents living on a desert planet. Check. A pilot that's completely courageous and fearless. Check. Han Solo, Poe Dameron. You've got the characters from the original trilogy. Han Solo and Princess Leia. You got the droid BB-8, R2-D2, and the characters from the original trilogy, Han Solo and Leia, Princess Leia. They do nothing. They're literally just useless in this movie. Han exists to die. Leia exists to look sad. Luke exists to look mad.
And also Rey, the problem Rey, I'm not sure about you, Harry. It's been a long time since we watched this movie. I don't remember like any of the characters having that much of a personality apart from like Finn. Rey and Poe, I never remember them having a personality. Kylo Ren was like, he didn't seem that mad. He was just ruthless. But afterwards, after the reveal that he was like Han and Leia's daughter, Han and Leia's son, I feel like he kind of changed to become a bit emotional, but trying to hide that like stupidly by pretending to be his ruthless self, even though that failed.
The characterization in all of these movies was very flawed, but The Force Awakens was probably the best off in this scenario because the other two movies were just plain out horrible. This movie is entertaining. You can watch it and be happy, but when you look at it from a critical level, when you look at the characters, how they developed, how it builds on from the original trilogy, how it dealt with the characters from the original trilogy, this movie fails in almost all of those respects. If you're a diehard Star Wars fan, you won't like this movie. If you're just going to watch a cool movie with space explosions and space wizards and lightsabers, then you will. So I think this probably deserves a low
C.
Not a C, a B. As a movie, it's okay. It's not boring. It's not boring.
Okay.
Which is something that I
wouldn't. Yeah, okay. I wouldn't know because I haven't seen the movie in a long time.
It's not boring, which is something that I cannot say about The Last Jedi, which runs
2.5
at
hours
225 minutes long. It is so long. It's like 2.5 hours of complete boredom. There is a 40-minute scene on some random planet that goes nowhere and leads nowhere, and it's so boring. You really start to feel the length in the last 40 minutes. It becomes very draining.
Yeah. Half an hour of it, half an hour of it is just like Rose Tico, who's some like random character who never gets developed, and Finn on some random planet doing something random. And then the first half an hour is just like them as their main rebel ship exploding. And then half of it is just Rey and Luke. And Luke gets changed way too much in a bad way.
Luke gets ruined in this movie. Like, actually ruined.
And another problem coming with this movie is, it's separate directors. The director wasn't even consistent.
So essentially, what Disney had planned for this trilogy was they would have 3 separate directors. J.J. Abrams for the first movie, Rian Johnson for the second, and Colin Trevorrow for the third movie. Unfortunately, Colin Trevorrow dropped out, so J.J. Abrams was brought back to direct the third movie. But that was their plan. But the problem was that they just brought all these directors in to write their own movies without having an overarching story. So you had 3 directors, in theory at least, with 3 completely different ideas, with 3 completely different stories that they wanted to tell, and they couldn't tell those stories because of what happened in The Force Awakens, because of what happened in The Last Jedi.
There's no connection. There's like no connection between the stories.
And the characters flip-flop massively, and you can tell this between The Last Jedi and Star Wars. A physical representation of this would be Kylo Ren, for example. In The Last Jedi, he just ditches his mask completely. In Rise of Skywalker, he just puts it back on like nothing happened. J.J. Abrams wanted to pretend like this movie never happened.
Monkeys. Dave.
We're doing a recording!
No!
I'll edit it out. Yeah, by the way, I just want to tell you this. I don't care that we're recording. This isn't just gonna be like a straight up tier list ranking. I'm gonna like edit it with like clips from the movie and stuff. Because otherwise it's gonna be a big mess. Unless my dad interrupted.
Sure.
Okay, where were we? Flip, my dad interrupted us. Okay. And that's why I think this movie deserves none other than C or a D.
D. This
movie is boring. Like one thing, sure, The Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones might be boring, but like they're boring because the script is bad. This movie is just long. Like you can just skip the political scenes of the prequel trilogy and you won't miss much. But like this movie just feels long, and it's not even like the scenes that are boring are like action scenes and intense scenes, and it's boring because you've seen it all before. Like one thing that people said about this movie was that it was so different, and yet it has the same relative story of Empire Strikes Back. This entire trilogy is just like a carbon copy of the original trilogy, brought like 30 years into the future, but with horrible characters and no overarching story. So everyone just made up what they wanted. And
people said that this was the best movie out of the 3. I just don't understand. I feel like Force Awakens was slightly better.
And I think the idea of no overarching story is never more apparent than in Rise of Skywalker, the most hated Star Wars movie possibly of all time. Now this movie...
D. Rise of Skywalker, D.
It's Rise of Skywalker. It's just Rise of Skywalker.
It's D.
It's Rise of Skywalker.
Oh. Wait, you're not even putting in a tier list? You're not even putting in a tier?
I haven't put it in the tier yet.
Oh, no, but put it in D tier.
I will. Just let's talk about it first. This movie is possibly the most hated Star Wars movie ever, due to the fact that it kind of ruined the trilogy even more. Any remnants of hope it still had after The Last Jedi were completely
shattered.
And one of the main problems with this was that the one remaining character from the original trilogy, the one hope, the one thing that people were still clinging onto, Princess Leia, was the actor of Princess Leia, Carrie Fisher, unfortunately passed away in before this movie came out. So instead of killing off our character in The Last Jedi, what they chose to do was use old footage and CGI to try and put her in some scenes in Rise of Skywalker, making her essentially redundant, apart from when she dies. Which, you could have just done that in The Last Jedi, but sure. This movie is horrible from beginning to end. It makes absolutely no sense. It's just an absolute mess. It brings back Emperor Palpatine, somehow...
Who somehow returned. Who somehow... There's literally a line from Poe saying, somehow Palpatine returned. Yeah, somehow. How did he return? That never got explained.
My man just got...
This movie way too rushed.
My man just got thrown off a spaceship and blown up, but he's immortal, he got that immortal powers.
No, Harry, you clearly forgot he has some Naruto powers. He has a totem of undying somehow. He secretly had a totem of undying hidden in his cloak.
And I think that pretty much sums up all our thoughts and puts it at a well-deserved D. And
no, we should put it in, Harry, we should put it in haven't watched because we wish we hadn't watched it.
Yeah, haven't watched. Rise of Skywalker, haven't watched because we wish we hadn't watched it. Now we're on to the final Star Wars movie of the evening, Rogue One, which is for some reason sitting right at the end of this list. Now, I don't remember this movie.
I remember this movie quite well not because I searched up what happened after I watched the movie, like 3 years later after I watched the movie, or 6 years later. But I remember this movie. People said that this was one of the better movies that Star Wars ever had. I think it should be A tier because it introduced some really good characters, like such as Jyn Erso. It introduces a personal motive, like a motive for the whole rebellion. But the problem is with it is quite long, and also there are plenty of characters who I feel like they don't get explained enough, such as Harry. Remember the blind Jedi? Not the blind Jedi, who I thought was a blind Jedi. The blind monk.
Yeah.
I don't remember his character being explained all that well. Neither do I remember with that Baze Malbus guy. Lots of the characters in the movie weren't explained that well, and it is really, really long. But it is a key connection, but it is a really good key connection between both the prequel trilogy and the original trilogy. It is a really good fight. It has a really good ending scene with Darth Vader slaughtering all the rebels, and the director Krennic, he felt quite empty. The problem with director Krennic was he felt quite empty, and he didn't feel like that much of a general. So, but still, this movie is really good. It brings in the formation of the second Death Star. It has a really good ending, in my opinion. One of the best endings in the Star Wars series. And yeah, it's one of the good actors, good characters, and yeah, it deserves its A position. A or B, but depending on how you look at it, I'm going to put it in A.
And now we're onto a series of shows and a movie that Spark hasn't watched, so I'll be taking the lead for this one. Now, the first one that we have on this list is the Clone Wars movie, which is less of a movie and is more 2 Clone Wars story arcs pushed together before they were ready, which is about as good as it sounds. Essentially, this is the introduction of the main 2 characters which Clone Wars, the show, focuses on. Rex, Captain Rex of the 601st, and Ahsoka Tano, Anakin Skywalker's Padawan, who just doesn't get mentioned in the prequel trilogy at all because she didn't exist. Now, this movie could have been good were it not for the fact that George Lucas pushed out 2 story arcs that were not finished yet, and that were not very good even besides that. You have Jabba the Hutt's son. He has a son now, okay, that's fine. The introduction of Ahsoka is okay, it could use some work, but the characters are fun. You have Anakin and Obi-Wan being their calm, jokey selves. And we finally see some of the things that that Anakin and Obi-Wan talked about in Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. All of these stories and these grand events. You see them fighting the Clone Wars properly. It's something that we never really got to see, and I think it's a good thing that the show existed. But that's for later, that's for the show. As for the movie, it's okay, it's not horrible, it's kind of watchable, but it's a bit boring. And compared to this, it's nothing compared to the show. I think it deserves a high C. If it was finished, if it was released properly, then it could have been good. But unfortunately, since it wasn't, it is stuck in this rather melancholy position. But moving on, we have the Clone Wars show, which is, in my opinion, one of, if not the best Star Wars shows ever released. The Clone Wars spanned 7 seasons, released over a series of years from 2000, and I think it was 4 to 2020. So that's nearly 16 years. It doesn't have that many episodes for 16 years of showing, but that's mostly because Disney cancelled it like 10 times, but it kept coming back. This show just keeps getting better and better, from the 1st season to the 7th. It introduces the Clone Wars premise, bringing it all the way from the beginning, all the way up to Anakin's turn to the dark side in Revenge of the Sith. And the season 7 finale, of which runs parallel to Revenge of the Sith, is simply incredible. It has one of the best lightsaber fights I think I've ever witnessed between Ahsoka Tano and Darth Maul, and it has one of the most compelling stories ever. It solves a lot of the questions that people would have had about Revenge of the Sith, such as, why did all of the clones turn against their masters if, as Clone Wars the show describes, they were so close to their commanders and their Jedi Knights? It explains all of these questions perfectly, and it adds so much to the lore and the story of the prequel trilogy, making the trilogy better in itself. I think this deserves none other than the position of S. Lower than the other two original trilogy movies, but good nonetheless. And this next show, Star Wars Rebels, is essentially a sequel series to the Clone Wars, which doesn't have any of the characters in it bar two, Captain Rex and Ahsoka Tano, who are the main characters. Now, Star Wars Rebels doesn't quite live up to the expectation of Clone Wars, because, quite frankly, nothing could. Unfortunately, it's set in a time period which there isn't much story to tell, because the original trilogy fills a lot of that up. And that kind of shows because they had to kind of curve around the overall story and come up with characters that don't really have much impact overall. For example, the finale to this entire show is essentially all of the characters trying to take back Lothal from the Empire, and Lothal is the home planet of the main character, Ezra. But it just doesn't feel like that big or that grand of a finale, because what's the point? Even if they fail, the rebels are going to win anyway, which we know from Return of the Jedi, and Lothal is going to be freed anyway. It's in stark contrast to the finale of Clone Wars, which is so good because of its emotion, because of its connection to the characters of Ahsoka and Rex. So, it's not a bad show, it's definitely watchable, but it does away with a lot of the more violent elements of Clone Wars as well, making it more kid-friendly, which unfortunately takes away from its entertainment as a whole. I think this deserves a position of a B. A high B, but a B nonetheless. And now we're on to The Bad Batch, which personally I watched, but I don't remember much of, so I think I'll hand over to Splash.
Sorry. As soon as you were about to say that, I'll take over for you in a hurry. It's been a while since I talked anyway. Okay, Bad Batch. The Bad Batch is a good animated series, but it is quite slow paced, but there is a key element to it. It is action adventure. The whole thing kind of revolves around the Batch, but it also revolves around a key character, Omega, who's a tiny girl who hasn't been anywhere outside of Kamino. Both the season 1 and season 2 were good of the series. It's definitely watchable. I'd say it is good because Omega hasn't been anywhere outside Kamino. So it kind of starts to develop. Her character starts to develop really slowly, but her character starts to develop well throughout the series. But one problem is the Bad Batch, the main characters, they haven't developed much either. But they have, apart from Crosshair. I do like Crosshair, how Crosshair has some individuality from the series, and that's why he decides to leave. That was a pretty good ending for season 1. And how Echo also has some individuality. So he decides to leave, but he rejoins the Batch, knowing that the Batch is his family. Also, Tech dies, which I thought was really unexpected. I think that paves the way for season 2 paves the way for Emperor Palpatine to show up. And one thing that's good about the series is it doesn't rely on cameos too much. It relies on cameos when it needs to. It also knows when when to bring the story and when to make it an adventure or make it like arc to the story. Some episodes may seem pointless, but there is something that's part of it that makes it useful to the whole two series or to whole 2 seasons. So, in my opinion, I think it's definitely better than the original Clone Wars. I think this deserves a solid B, in my opinion.
Okay then, so now we're on to The Mandalorian. So I've watched season 1 and 2 of The Mandalorian, Sparsh has watched all 3. So I think I'll go over the first 2, and Sparsh, I think you can take the reins for the third one.
We could just focus on the 2 seasons because
just a quick by side.
You just haven't seen.
Sparsh. I think it's better if you just do it like individually because I think it's kind of a mess if we do try and do it together.
Fine.
Okay. So for the Book of Boba Fett, like you can talk about the first. You talk about it for a bit, then I'll talk about it. Same with Obi-Wan and Andor. You can talk about it. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Back to the show. So, The Mandalorian was released after Rise of Skywalker, and since The Rise of Skywalker, there have been no Star Wars movies ever. So there was a lot of hype for The Mandalorian. There was a lot of, not hype, but there was a lot of thought behind it. Would it be good? Would it be like the sequel trilogy? Unfortunately for Star Wars fans, it was good. Season 1 of The Mandalorian impressed nearly everyone. being a show that was simple, unlike the messy and convoluted sequel trilogy. It was simple. It had a simple story at the heart of it. A journey of a simple Mandalorian trying to protect his adopted child. Every adventure felt kind of unique, and it felt kind of, as some have described it, as a video game. It was entertaining to watch. It was nice to see this Mandalorian, this supposedly cold-hearted, barbaric Mandalorian, bonding with Grogu, or Baby Yoda as he was more commonly known. So season 1 is essentially about the Mandalorian and Baby Yoda just kind of wandering around, not doing much, until the season finale where Grogu is kidnapped. And wait, is Grogu kidnapped? No, he's not, is he? Swash?
Yeah.
What happens in the season 1 finale?
So, for Mandalorian.
Yeah.
Basically, what happens in the season finale is that Mando gets the Darksaber. He basically just goes on he goes to the mines of Mandalore to redeem himself after taking off his helmet.
Not season 3, the season 1 finale.
Oh, the season 1 finale.
Yeah,
season 1 finale. What happens is that Moff Gideon tries to get Grogu, or Baby Yoda, since we don't know his name yet.
Yeah.
He tries to get Grogu, but Mando saves Grogu. IG-11 sacrifices himself so that they can escape.
Oh yeah.
And I remember there's a big fight. I remember lots of soldiers of Moff Gideon dies. Mando and Cara trying to get Moff Gideon. His thing crashes, but Moff Gideon survives, Mara is in a peaceful place.
Okay. And in the season 1 finale, the villain of The Mandalorian, or at least the first 2 seasons, are finally revealed. Moff Gideon, who's found Baby Yoda and is looking for him, working for the Empire, trying to kill him. Shoot, the Empire's dead, isn't it? Wait. In the season 1 finale, the villain is finally introduced. Moff Gideon, leading a remnant of the Empire, trying to hunt down and kill Baby Yoda. The first season finale of season 1 is merely a prelude to season 2, with Mando managing to save Grogu from Moff Gideon and almost killing the man, but unfortunately he survives to season 2. And moving on to season 2, season 2 was a lot different from the first season of The Mandalorian, as throughout the first season, we didn't see any previous characters at all. There were only new characters introduced. Cara Dune, IG-11, all these droids and people from all these different planets who we had never seen before. And that changed a lot in season 2. We were beginning to introduce other characters. Ahsoka Tano, for example, was introduced. Luke Skywalker appeared as a cameo in the final episode. Sabine Wren, what's her second name? Kryze.
What? So Bo-Katan's last name?
Oh yeah, Bo-Katan.
Kryze.
Yeah.
Bo-Katan Kryze.
Yeah. And Bo-Katan Kryze, self-elected leader of the Mandalorians. These cameos made season 2 feel distinct from season 1, different, and it all builds up to the season 2 finale, where Grogu is kidnapped by Moff Gideon. Fortunately, Mando and the team manage to rescue him with a quick help from Boba Fett and Fennec Shand, who we'll come on to later with the Book of Boba Fett. And that, with the end of the season 2 finale, Luke Skywalker taking Grogu to train him, Mando being left with the Darksaber and without Grogu, brings us quite neatly onto the Book of Boba Fett, which I think we'll talk about before The Mandalorian season 3, as it is kind of a prelude to it. Sparsh, I'll hand it over to you.
So I'm doing Book of Boba Fett?
And Mando season 3.
Okay. Mando season 3 is very, very bad. It's very slow paced.
Talk about the Book of Boba Fett first. Talk about the Book of Boba Fett first.
Okay. The Book of Boba Fett. I think Harry has also seen. I'm pretty sure Harry's also seen this, but I'll say.
I thought I have, but you're going to talk about the Book of Boba Fett and the Mandalorian.
Okay, so Book of Boba Fett. The Book of Boba Fett is very bad. It relies too much. It's very slow paced, having to heavily rely on flashbacks for content. The first episode is almost completely a flashback, and too much of it, and too much of the other episodes contains flashbacks as well, and the whole thing revolves around Boba Fett and Fennec Shand. Yet Boba Fett doesn't even appear in episode 6 or 7. and hardly appears in episode 5. The series revolves too much around cameos and put too much focus on those cameos instead of the main two characters, Boba Fett and Fennec Shand. What I think should have been done is they should have dealt with the flashbacks in the first 2 episodes itself, but still kind of focused on a growing story. So half should have been in the flashback, maybe most of it should have been like a growing story, and then a few minutes should have been a flashback. The flashbacks are too bulky, and nothing much really happens in them. So I feel it. So that's one major problem with this entire series. 2, the story doesn't really. The story focuses on growth, but it's not growth for Boba Fett, who's the main character. It's more growth for the Mandalorian and other characters. Grogu reunites with Mandalorian after the events of Mando season 2, but there's nothing much changes for Boba Fett. He hasn't promised his Tatooine anything new at all. So he just hasn't done much in the entire series apart from kill a couple couple mobsters and protect his legacy as king. So in this, compared to Last Jedi, it does contain some action. It's not completely boring. It does have a bit of the political factors compared to the prequel movies, but it's not as much. But again, Boba Fett is kind of ruined. He feels kind of soft in this movie. He's kind of changed to become like a political ruler, even though everyone loves him for being a bounty hunter. So I'd give it a Book of Boba Fett C. And now, Star Wars The Mandalorian Season 3. Season 3, well, you'd think for Season 3 it would be really, really good compared to the success of the other 2 seasons. You'd be very, very wrong. It goes Mandalorian Season 3. It gets off to a shaky start with it pacing quite slow, Navarro being a more peaceful place and developed place. But the problem is, Mando doesn't feel the same. He's more or less just there's only like one action scene, and that's just between Grief Karga and a couple low-life pirates. There's nothing too special for the entire series. And Moff Gideon, the story hardly grows. It hardly grows. Mandalorian spent 3 episodes trying to get to the Mines of Mandalore. And afterwards, nothing much happens. He just goes on adventures. The 3rd episode doesn't even hardly focuses on Mando. It focuses on some doctor who appears for most of the episode and doesn't appear in the rest of the series, even though he's supposedly crucial to the Moff Gideon's plan. And the action isn't even. The action is kind of it's pretty good. The action's pretty good, but it's a kind of lackluster compared to the other seasons. But luckily, this time there is one plus. It focuses on Mando, not that much, but still focuses on Mando more than Grogu this time. Because Mando showing some growth. This is the whole series starting to shift from Grogu to Mando, a more personal issue for Mando. So, in my opinion, Mando Season 3... Oh, Harry, am I counting in, the first 2 seasons?
Yeah.
Because
yeah.
So, considering the success of the first 2 seasons, Season 3 ruined it too much that it doesn't deserve S tier anymore. It deserves an A tier. Season 3, the only good thing about it was it shifted from Grogu to Mando, so A. Should I explain Obi-Wan Kenobi? Because
I'll talk about Obi-Wan. You've seen both, so you'll talk about Kenobi and Mando.
Okay, Obi-Wan Kenobi. This show was probably even slightly better than Book of Boba Fett. It didn't rely on cameos, which is one thing. And one problem I forgot to mention in the Book of Boba Fett is all of the action takes place on one planet. It doesn't shift like location. It takes place on one planet, Tatooine, and that makes the whole thing boring. Obi-Wan Kenobi shifts the whole thing. But again, it gets off to the same slow start as the Book of Boba Fett. It ruins Obi-Wan Kenobi too much. You'd think it does portray him quite well as like someone who's given up, but again, he doesn't seem like reluctant. He doesn't seem like he has the spark again to fight. He doesn't have the spark to fight again. he kind of just seemed he doesn't have any growth throughout the series apart from caring for Leia. And the problem, one other problem is it's too dark. Like in the series, you could hardly see a thing. I had to watch it with full brightness, and yet you could barely see anything in the fight and the action. The action was better this time, but there are still a couple plot holes that don't make sense. One, why does Obi-Wan Kenobi have no scars on him whatsoever? Two, why was the lighting so dark? How could Obi-Wan see a thing apart from with his gloomy little lightsaber? There's too many plot holes and things that just don't make sense, and the action can be good. The action can be quite slow at times, and too much of it is just rescuing Leia, and Obi-Wan having to sacrifice himself. Kind of getting an arc of who he was, but it's changing too much, and the series doesn't try to change him back to who he was. And the cameo of Qui-Gon Jinn just didn't feel right. It just didn't feel right. Like Qui-Gon Jinn wasn't that guy for the cameo. So just Obi-Wan Kenobi can go and see. It doesn't. Hello, Harry. Obi-Wan Kenobi see.
Oh.
Now, last but definitely not least, Andor. Andor, in my opinion, is one of the best series that Star Wars has ever had. Andor is really, really good. I'd say it deserves an A tier, and here's why. It kind of presents Cassian Andor in a different way. Some people would say Andor's really bad. Some people would say it's really good. I say it's really good. And Cassian Andor is presented in a different way. He seems like a type of guy to not care for. He's like a bounty hunter type character who has no love for the Empire, but no interest in it. He has no interest in politics whatsoever. But you gradually start to see his metamorphosis into the character, the general he becomes in Rogue One, and that metamorphosis is really good. There's also some really good episodes, such as the one on Aldhani, the 6th episode, and the 10th episode. Even the finale is quite good. Like Ferrix becoming a rebellious planet. Dedra Meero is also quite a ruthless villain. The characters were quite good. It focused on Mon Mothma, who there is a couple problems with the series. Mon Mothma being one of them. I did like Luthen Rael, however you say it. I think it's Luthen Rael. Luthen Rael was a really good character. It also returned Saw Gerrera. It presents both of them in a way that they're both extremists who are willing to die for their rebellion, who fear that they're not going to live much longer, who fear that they're not going to live to see the Empire being destroyed. They're both really good characters, but the problem is there are a couple episodes that feel quite pointless, and it is quite slow-paced, but it kind of rewrites the whole political side of the Empire to show how it's changed from the Republic to the Empire, and the cruelty shown by the Empire is really good as well. So it fits perfectly in with Cassian's metamorphosis. Season 2 is guaranteed to be really good. It would have released probably maybe somewhere this year or next year had the strikes not happened. But yeah, that's our rating for every single Star Wars project apart from the ones we haven't watched.
Thank you for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe, and thank you for visiting Hash Talks.